Hi again. Let me get my hat. I'm asking too, what if Anakin deleted deleted the security cams, the security recordings of Order 66. Of Order 66. Yeah, I saw the post that PPSW made, and I'm thinking, like, I even commented, why didn't Anakin delete them after, or like after he did the killing in the Jedi Temple? Why didn't he just delete the recordings? Let me go right here. So you can see my comment I did on Blue Channel. Right here. Not you. You. Yeah, right here. I commented right there. Why didn't Anakin put like deleting? You're like, why didn't Anakin just delete the evidence? Like, really? So that way no one knows him. That's the one thing you should have done, like delete the evidence, but no. Anyway, this might be in two parts, I believe. So, I'm asking you, what if Anakin Skywalker deleted the recordings of Order 66? And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. And also, happy Pride Month. And let's start with Order 66.
Hello. Our story begins inside the Jedi Temple during Operation Nightfall. The Jedi Order was under assault. The clones were following their directive to execute Order 66. Anakin had killed younglings, knights, padawans, temple guards, instructors, Sindralik, and Shaak Ti by this point. His clones were rampaging through the Jedi across the temple, just as their brothers were doing the same galaxy-wide. The beginning of the end of an era was finished. The Clone Wars took a lot, but now it would see the end of the Confederacy and the destruction of the Jedi Order. Skywalker was being trailed by a unit of his best men within the temple. He was keeping his eyes peeled for any other Jedi that might want to try and attack him, but truthfully, his work was pretty much done here. As he was moving through, he could sense the presence of his master, so he dispersed his men and moved to kneel before him. Sidious was pleased, as he always was, telling Skywalker that he had done well, and asking that he rise as Lord Vader. Anakin did. Palpatine put his hand on Anakin's shoulder and guided him forward. They moved out into the middle of the temple, where the floors were littered with dead Jedi. Palpatine motioned his hands outwards, telling Skywalker that this destruction would ensure that they could save Padme. They would use the dark side to fuel their quest for greater knowledge. He looked at Anakin and reminded him of what he must do. Anakin remembered, go to Mustafar to wipe out the Separatist warmongers. This was everything that Skywalker needed. He felt shame in killing the younglings, before snapping back into the moment and doing so without hesitation. Palpatine reassured his eager young friend that with the power of the dark side, they would be unstoppable in their desires. All Anakin needed to do was trust him, as he had for all the years leading up to this moment. Skywalker nodded his head. He was groomed for this, told day in and day out by Palpatine that he was the wisest Jedi he'd ever met. Told that Palpatine believed he'd become the greatest of the Jedi, convinced that the Jedi feared who he could become. Anakin allowed this Dark Lord to twist his mind, because he never had any reason to not trust him. Palpatine's manipulation went through their entire relationship, and all Anakin needed was to be reminded that Palpatine had never led him astray. Whether Sheev was a Sith or a politician, he never wanted to hurt Anakin. He always put him before himself. There wasn't a reason to doubt Palpatine. Anakin watched his friend move away from him on the catwalk. A Royal Guard unit rendezvoused with him, and Anakin turned back, preparing to move to the Mustafar system. First, he needed to make sure Padme was alright. That was his concern in all this chaos. As he moved back, he could hear Palpatine laugh. His eyes turned back, and he watched a young Jedi get slain by a crimson blade. Palpatine still had to have a little bit of his fun. Anakin pulled back to the moment and ran forward. As he came into the hallway, he saw a number of dead younglings. He didn't kill them, the clones did, but he thought about what Padme might think. If she saw him responsible for this destruction or killing these students, she might think lesser of him. While it wasn't the first time he admitted to killing off children, maybe it wouldn't be best to admit it when they're about to be parents. Plus, in Anakin's mind, there was no reason for the public to see Anakin or Palpatine inside the temple. If he was going to serve Palpatine for the long run, which he didn't really think he would, he needed to clear his name and that of Palpatine's. The only thing Anakin thought would be an issue was a misconstrued message, one that might come from seeing these recordings. Surely Palpatine would back him in that circumstance, as one of the Jedi to stand up to the Jedi Masters of the High Council and do what was morally right to protect Palpatine. Hopefully that was a story they would hear, if they heard anything at all. Skywalker just didn't need rumors of him inside the temple hurting Padme's heart. She would eventually come to see it as he had, that the Jedi were the evil in the galaxy. Anakin moved back into the Jedi archives and took a Jedi Master's code from their belt, accessing the archives and quickly deleting everything he could. While he was doing this, he set up a come home message, the one that would tell all surviving Jedi that the temple was a safe haven. Anakin's hand hovered over the send message for a short moment. His thoughts were wondering if this was right or wrong. But Sidious was right. It was the pathway to unknown abilities. If he trusted Palpatine, he could save Padme, and when that was finished, he could go back to being like himself. Skywalker heeded the final words spoken to him from his master. It was a sound idea. Going further into the darkness would help him preserve her life. He sent the message, moved to the hangar bay, and joined her at her apartment before departing for Mustafar. When the following day came around, the Jedi Temple was lifeless, aside from the few clones stationed to kill unlucky Padawans and Knights making their way back to their home. Obi-Wan and Yoda were two of those Jedi, though they weren't brought back by the all-clear sign. They were here to see if their home was safe. When they found out that it wasn't, they were disheartened, especially because it meant they would have to kill the men they served with since the beginning of the war. They moved on the temple, wearing their robes, and they blitzed the clones. Killing Knights and Padawans wasn't like fending off two of the best Jedi in the Order. Council members were not comparable to the Jedi that had been slaughtered hours before. Once the clones were cleaned up, Obi-Wan and Yoda moved into the temple, and all they found was destruction. The younglings weren't even spared. They were slaughtered. The Jedi Order was in shambles, but then there was another painful truth. These younglings were slain by a lightsaber. Yoda didn't have the heart to tell his friend that it was his student that did this. Yoda simply looked at the destruction and felt his heart sink lower into his body. He and Obi-Wan moved about the temple searching for the survivors of the Purge, but not finding anyone. The building was pretty much entirely empty and devoid of life. There were some clones moving about, but that didn't really count for much. Obi-Wan and Yoda stopped in the archives as Kenobi told Master Yoda that he needed to see for himself who was behind this. Obi-Wan had reset the calibration for the archives, so hopefully there wouldn't be any other Jedi lost to this path. As Kenobi delved into the hollow recordings, he found nothing. Everything from the previous night had been cleared out. There were a couple recordings of clones, but that was long after Anakin had left the temple. Obi-Wan turned back and asked the Grand Master who could be responsible for this. Yoda's frown wore that of a truth he didn't want to tell, but it had to be done. He told Master Kenobi that his boy had been turned to the dark side, corrupted by Darth Sidious. Obi-Wan's hand moved for his mouth. Shock was worn on his face. He had millions of thoughts run through his body upon this revelation. He then spoke up, breaking through a crack in his voice to tell Yoda that he was wrong. Anakin wasn't capable of such atrocities. Yoda frowned. This was why he didn't want to say anything, because he knew that Obi-Wan would refuse to learn the truth. Yoda told Obi-Wan that he had to believe him. There might not be security recordings, but it was the reality. Kenobi shot back, telling Yoda that it had to be a deception. Anakin wouldn't be able to live with himself if he killed all those children. Kenobi continued assuring Yoda that his student knew how highly those kids thought of him. Anakin was one of their idols. Every youngling in the Order wanted to be like him, because they all knew him. He was the chosen one, successful wartime general, and one of the most compassionate people in the Order. Obi-Wan's voice moved from shock and sorrow to anger. He told Yoda that he understood why the Council didn't trust Anakin, that it was them who told Obi-Wan to have faith in Anakin. If they believed there was faith to be had in the boy, then why would Yoda ever suggest that he do something so disgusting, abhorrent, and Obi-Wan stopped. He looked over to Yoda, who shamefully sighed, telling Obi-Wan that he could feel it upon their entry. Skywalker came in here with worry. It was hidden behind his determination to do something. Yoda couldn't figure out what it was, but his burden was left behind. the burden he carried because of Darth Sidious, the promise of something so unattainable. Sure, to Obi-Wan, this was actually a feasible reality. He could imagine Anakin siding with Palpatine so that he could gain something, but he still refused to believe that Anakin was behind this. He had to be somewhere. If not here, then he had to be relocating younglings and survivors to a distant location. Yoda tried to reason with Kenobi, but by this point, there was nowhere to reason with him. Yoda had seen Jedi fall victim to the dark side. Dooku was his last student after all, so he was more than familiar with the disbelief. But Yoda needed Obi-Wan to be level-headed here. Master Kenobi needed to find Skywalker and stop him. If he couldn't do that, then their religion might be lost forever. From their current perspective, there were only 2 Jedi in the entire galaxy, and it was them. They couldn't afford to lose their order because Obi-Wan believed something that wasn't true. Kenobi truthfully was outraged. The more Yoda spoke, the more he felt like Anakin after he was assigned to spy on the Chancellor. Obi-Wan told Yoda one last time,
"Oh, so now you know how it feels like, Master Kenobi."
In an effort to try and stop this line of thinking, that Anakin was upset. He was polarized by the Council's decision to assign him to his mission, as well as the fact that he didn't receive the rank of Master. They spoke about why it hadn't happened, and Obi-Wan told Anakin that he believed he would receive the promotion after the war was won, which he then informed Yoda that Anakin took these words and held them dearly. Hell, even before going to Utapau, Anakin wore nothing but a smile on his face. Padme said he'd been stressed, but Obi-Wan made sure that his former student was okay before he left for his fight with Grievous. Yoda told Obi-Wan to stop. All of this was getting them nowhere. The reality was the fate that had beset Anakin. His orders were to find him and stop him. If it came through conversation, then so be it. If it came from a fight, then Obi-Wan needed to win. The Grand Master was going to fight Sidious and defeat him. Afterwards, they could find out what really happened to young Skywalker. Obi-Wan was incredibly disenchanted with Yoda. This was such ridiculous behavior. He couldn't imagine Anakin doing something so evil, so he went straight to Padme to find out what happened to him. Upon his arrival, she said that Anakin wasn't here. She was initially worried because Anakin mentioned that the Jedi had betrayed the Republic and attempted to overthrow the Chancellor by assassinating him. She was good friends with Obi-Wan, but still, she was on edge. Maybe it was in fact true. Anakin seemed to believe it was, and why would he lie? Kenobi came in with haste. He told Padme that Anakin was in danger, and he had to know where he was. He explained everything said by Yoda, and said that he needed to find Anakin so he could learn the truth for himself. Obi-Wan expressed through his words that he was only trying to protect his former student. There was no malicious intent in his voice or his words. To Padme, this was reason enough to tell Kenobi where to go, even suggesting that she would escort him there herself. Obi-Wan had no issue with this. He and Padme were friends. Anakin didn't turn. Why would there be an issue? Kenobi was well aware of the relationship and the fact that Padme was pregnant, so he wasn't going to pretend like she didn't know where Anakin was to begin with. They quickly loaded up and left for Mustafar. Obi-Wan and Padme spoke extensively about what Anakin said on the way there. He never said he did anything at the temple. She did reiterate what Anakin said about hoping that Obi-Wan was loyal to the Chancellor, not the Senate. This was a little weird from Anakin, especially since he hated politics. Obi-Wan was willing to ignore the odd statement, though. What they spoke about the most was the apparent assassination attempt on Palpatine. Obi-Wan expressed what he and the Council had agreed to, which was something Anakin wasn't aware of. Had he been on the Council before the Battle of Coruscant, he would have been aware of it. But the point being, the Council believed Palpatine was Sidious, the Dark Lord of the Sith, and they agreed that if information was revealed that Sidious was that Sith Lord, they were to act immediately. There were 2 deals actually, one in which they learned the truth, and one in which General Grievous was defeated and they acted. Obi-Wan expressed that the news could have traveled to Coruscant, but from his perspective, it seemed highly unlikely that Mace would have moved so quickly after Grievous's defeat. So this led Obi-Wan to his next point. He believed that Palpatine was indeed the Sith Lord, but Anakin might not know. If he did know, he told the right people. But the question was, why would he go to Mustafar? Well, Padme informed him that the Separatist leaders were there. Obi-Wan then came up with a theory. He thought that Anakin made a deal with Palpatine, one where he learned the truth about his identity in exchange for the location of the CIS Council. He told Mace that Palpatine was a Sith Lord, and then ran, and then, well, Actually, never mind. He'd have to go back and stop Mace from assassinating him. Obi-Wan just had to believe and had the hope that Anakin wasn't who Yoda said he was. But this realization might have just made it impossible to defend Anakin's actions. When they arrived at the planet of Mustafar, Anakin ran from the main complex to greet what he thought was just going to be Padme. When he saw Padme and Obi-Wan walking down the ramp, he got angry. Skywalker was able to bask in the darkness here. He was left alone with his thoughts and the final words of Palpatine, all of this leaving him to seep further into the darkness. Obi-Wan asked Anakin if he was alright, to which Anakin looked at Padme with a look of betrayal. She caught it. There was a madness in his eyes, and she couldn't really figure out why it was there. She asked what was wrong, and Anakin looked back to Obi-Wan, demanding to know why she brought him here. They were both confused as they tried to calm him down, but all Anakin saw was a challenger. He demanded that Obi-Wan clear up why he was here, to which Kenobi told him the truth. Then Anakin wanted to know where Obi-Wan's loyalties lie, which were with the Republic and democracy, though this was not loyalty to the Chancellor himself. Anakin decided to press further, wondering why Obi-Wan came here with Padme. There was a madness in his voice, one pulling him further from the light. Anakin saw Obi-Wan as that challenger, as someone that Padme could potentially be cheating on him with. Wasn't it Obi-Wan who was in her apartment before he went to Utapau? Why was he there? That had to mean something, right? The worst part about power is that, like the Sith and like the Jedi, when one gains it, they grow a fear of losing it. This had Anakin back right where he was, in this moment, afraid that his former teacher was here to take everything from him. To take his power, to take his wife and child, to take everything he worked so hard for. But Obi-Wan didn't understand the madness, and because he didn't, Anakin believed he was being mocked. That Obi-Wan was trying to toy with his head. Skywalker grabbed his lightsaber off his belt and told Obi-Wan that he wasn't welcome here anymore. Obi-Wan was confused by this, but he stayed extra alert. He asked Anakin if what Yoda said about him was true, and Anakin looked at Padme and then back to Obi-Wan. He got a little arrogant. He was all-powerful, so he gloated, telling Obi-Wan that he killed Sindralik and Shakti. He killed whoever tried to challenge him because they couldn't beat him. They were traitors, and he treated them like traitors. Padme could hear it again, just like with the Tusken Raiders. Anakin turned back to her, sensing her doubt, but Obi-Wan called Anakin's name and told him that this wasn't the way to go. Anakin nastily looked over to his master and told Obi-Wan to not make him kill him. Kenobi took this threat very literally, as he looked at Padme with a look that suggested get inside the ship. She slowly moved back, but Anakin took notice. As he moved to lift his arm, Kenobi ignited his lightsaber, telling Anakin to stop this now. The darkness was not forgiving. It would only take for him until there was nothing left. Skywalker looked back to his former teacher and ignited his own lightsaber, darting across the platform and engaging with Kenobi. Their blades were quick and remarkable. They didn't leave the landing platform, as Obi-Wan kept his eyes out for Padme to make sure she got inside her starship. Kenobi was in disbelief. How could this have happened to Anakin? He tried breaking him down, trying to find the boy he raised within him. Obi-Wan defended himself masterfully, trying to ask about Padme and why Anakin would do this, or ask about Ahsoka and what he thought Palpatine and his clones would do with her. What about Shmi? Would she be proud of this outrageous attack? Anakin was losing concentration, but he did not stop his attack. Due to them fighting on the landing platform, there was a shock when a blaster rang out, and Anakin slumped over to the ground. He was still conscious, but very confused. As he looked back, the blaster sounded again. Obi-Wan looked up and thanked her with his eyes, before he turned Anakin over and removed his lightsaber from his hand. Padme stunned Skywalker. She didn't want him to hurt Obi-Wan or for Obi-Wan to hurt him. She moved down the ramp slowly as Obi-Wan tried to make sure she was alright. This type of thing couldn't be healthy for her. Being on Mustafar with all the smoke, ash, and soot couldn't be good for her health. She agreed as he told her to get back inside and he'd get Anakin in. Within the coming minutes, R2, Anakin, and Obi-Wan would be inside the ship. 3PO piloted the ship away from the planet and back to Naboo, as Obi-Wan restrained Anakin away from Padme and kept his lightsaber away from view. When Anakin eventually woke up, he saw Padme and Obi-Wan sitting on different sides of the same room. He was confused, but he pulled at his shoulders, trying to release himself from the grip of whatever was keeping him tied down. Obi-Wan and Padme wanted the full truth. They wanted to know what happened and why he did it. While there was still the madness within Anakin, he didn't want to break. He was trying to be evil and brooding, and he was trying to obsess over power, but it wasn't him. He was a good person. Both Padme and Obi-Wan believed he was. This was someone convinced by a dark eminence to be someone else, to save someone from what was called certain death. Obi-Wan and Padme, while Anakin was unconscious, spoke about the massacre of the Tuscans. It was something Kenobi was completely unaware of, and upon his revelation, he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Now everything became more real to Obi-Wan. Being that it wasn't the first time Skywalker murdered as many people as he could within a single instance, it forced Kenobi to accept who Anakin was. As Skywalker tried to figure a way out of the situation, he decided that it was time he tell the truth. He looked at both of them and explained what happened, from the nightmares to the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise. Following that, there was the threat of Padme dying in childbirth, telling Mace the truth of who Sidious was, the betrayal of Mace Windu, the march on the temple, killing an unarmed Shaak Ti and slaughtering the younglings. Each word became more painful for Anakin, because while he was aware of his actions and understood that he was fully responsible for them, only now, in retrospect, did he realize that he was being played for a fool. He saw how he was manipulated, and now he'd have to live with these actions. Sure, the Jedi weren't great, and Anakin had plenty of issues with them, but they weren't the bad guys. They were a sincere order, one that could inspire the people of the galaxy.
That's going to end part 1. You know, it's been a long part 1. Anyway, bye for now. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. I'll be ending here, and I'll be back again in literally like 2 seconds. Well, 10 seconds.